uh, 2 to 3 for this meeting. So let me start with roll call. Anne Marie.
Councilmember Orgill,
Here.
Councilmember Weiss.
Here.
Councilmember Whalen, Mayor Pro Tem Renagi,
Present.
Mayor Kim.
Here. Okay, this is the city council special meeting. This is for the standards of cover. So we'll have a presentation. How long is your presentation, guys?
20 minutes.
Okay, 20 minutes. Then we'll have some time for public comment, but I want to reserve time for the council. So we'll see when we end how long I'll give for public comment, but probably not 3 minutes. So, because we have to get through this and we have a hard stop in an hour. So now I'll turn it over to the chief.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, Nico King, your fire chief, here this afternoon for the one item in the special meeting. In late 2022, the fire department engaged Emergency Services Consulting International to conduct a community risk assessment and standards of cover. As you know, your fire department strives to serve the community as best we can every single day, and we do that at a very high level. But receiving a community risk assessment and a standards of cover study is external assessment on our administrative and operational delivery of those services, and it's compared to national standards. So today we have Richard Curtis and Patrick McIntosh from ESCI that's going to deliver the presentation. I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Patrick McIntosh. I'm a associate consultant with ESCI. Next to me is Richard Curtis. He's one of our senior project managers who oversaw the efforts on this project. We also had a couple other ESCI team members who worked on this project with us, but I want to just take a minute to say thank you to the city staff. We asked for a lot of information along the way, a lot of discussions with different departments in the city. Hats off to Chief King and the members of the fire department, and in particular, Deputy Chief Teichman. She worked tirelessly with us for the last 18 months, helping us gather data, answer our questions, and work through a lot of information. And we wouldn't be here today if we didn't have her hard work and dedication to help us along the way. So we talk about the process that we undertook. We actually started in October of 2022 with a kickoff meeting with the chief and his senior staff. After that meeting, staff spent a couple of months uploading information for us to our team website. And then in December of 2022, our team spent 3 days here in the city, meeting with key staff, visiting and evaluating all of your fire stations, and touring key areas of the city as we did our risk assessment. The first part of 2023, we spent about 4 months going through all of the data, doing some analysis, computer modeling, building our recommendations in the report to ultimately present to the city. We initially presented to the city manager in May of 2023 and ultimately to the EDPC in October of 2023, and we're pleased to be with you here today. From a 30,000-foot level, some key findings, most of which I think probably won't be a surprise to any of you as residents and leaders in the community. We recognize that the city is somewhat isolated here with the canyons and the open space going north towards Newport Beach, which makes it difficult for outside resources to respond into the city in a timely manner. We certainly know that your community is high risk with the geographics, with the urban interface, with the environmental risk associated with the ocean, earthquakes, and those kinds of things. The street network, and we saw it today coming into town, presents challenges often at times. We recognize that property values in the city are very high, which makes it challenging as the city leaders work to provide adequate facilities to serve your residents. And then one of the things we'll get into a little bit more in detail is what we call a response force. And those are the resources needed to manage what we typically look at as a moderate risk in the community. And we found that your response force in the fire department is undersized for the moderate community risk that they would have to deal with. One of the questions that we always get is what kind of data and standards do we utilize when we take on a project of this nature? So this slide just gives you a little bit of background into the depth and breadth of the information that we utilize. We had a lot of response data for your computer from your computer-aided dispatch system, as well as your records management system. We utilized a variety of GIS layers from the city, from the county, from the state, and other public accessed resources. We had building data that we got from your building department, certainly our site visits that I mentioned, demographic data from Bureau of Labor Statistics, and then a variety of industry standards that we use in the fire service from the National Fire Protection Association and from the Center for Fire Agency International Accreditation, which is one of our professional accreditation agencies, and then certainly industry best practice. So that's kind of the framework for the project, and Richard is going to get into some of the details of the risk assessment and the standards of cover for you.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm going to need to run through slides fairly rapidly. Yeah, I would encourage you to walk through the story map that we provided you a link for, and also ask Chief King and Teichman any questions that you might have related to that, because some of this information is going to be a little bit technical, but we'll boil it down so that it makes sense. So the ESCI's process for doing a community risk assessment standard of cover is identify the community risk, looking at probably the most major. Every community has a lot of various risks. We're looking for the big ticket items within each community, and you guys are faced with quite a few as compared to many other communities. We assess the current deployment system of the fire department, identify if there's any gaps, and we use our national standards in comparison of what that looks like in terms of those gaps, and then identify any achievable benchmarks that may come forward from that. Once that standard recovery community risk assessment is completed and we present it here tonight, we encourage the organization to move forward with a strategic planning process. That is a 3 to 5 year plan that the department can run forward with, getting some input from the community on what the expectations are from the community in terms of fire services. And also it involves the fire staff to ensure that the items that you approve moving forward from this community risk assessment are integrated in that plan, and they have their marching orders and can get it implemented effectively. And if they chose to do so, that puts them in a very nice position to move forward with accreditation, which is a very valuable thing for organizations to do. There are not many fire departments in the U.S. that are accredited, but it is something that seems to be growing, and it is encouraged by ESCI that agencies get accredited in the long run. It takes several years to go through that process. So what I wanted to show you on the first map here is the 3 of the 6 risks I'll show you on maps. One of the things that Patrick talked about is we've got your information from the building department from the city of Laguna. What we did with that information is we had the square footage of the building height, and then we were able to determine the fire flow or the required fire flow for that particular building. We understand a lot of the buildings have built-in fire sprinkler systems, and within the International Fire Code system, there's a reduction that's given in the fire flow when a building is equipped with residential or commercial sprinkler system. So we removed, there were 218 buildings that had fixed systems in them. Out of that, 77 of the buildings were reclassified into a lower class. And we identified 4 different class levels: low, moderate, high, and extreme. And we don't have the details with this today about what those fire flows look like, but we can get you that information if you're curious about that. So what's depicted on the picture here, the red buildings are the ones that are considered extreme based on fire flow. And the orange buildings, which are hard to see in this particular map, and it's easier to see in the story map, are the high risk category buildings. Moderate risk buildings are the yellows. green are the low, and then there may be some others that are anomalies in the data set that we received. One thing to recognize, a moderate structure is ranging from size of a single family home to a duplex. So you're looking at fairly decent range of somewhere around 2,500 square feet to maybe about 5,000 or 4,000 square feet. One of the other risks that your community faces, and I don't need to tell you, is the wildland risk. And you've sustained a number of fires over the years and some close calls. And 65% of the buildable property within the city of Laguna is within a very high fire hazard severity zone. And that's depicted on that center map with the orange or pink color that overlays the building structures. And of course, California known for its frequency of earthquakes. There's a high frequency rate of earthquakes within the region. Interestingly enough, the particular category that we got from the USGS shows that this particular area doesn't seem to sustain the severity of earthquakes that other areas in California do, but you still are very prone to it. Then three other risks I wanted to talk about. One is liquefaction, which is of course related to earthquakes. As an earthquake occurs, the soils under which many of the buildings in Laguna are built upon become more of a cement liquid sort of property, and buildings collapse or tilt. And you've probably seen that in other areas of this state. And there are a couple of areas. There's one area in the downtown area to be concerned about. It's about 12 block area that runs across Pacific Coast Highway. And there's another area running across Pacific Coast Highway at the Lissa Point. So you do have some vulnerabilities there. Also related to earthquakes is the tsunami inundation area. You have a tsunami inundation map that's been provided to you by USGS. And that shows some intervening of a wavefront, and identified to be about 3 to 4 foot wavefront in the downtown area, as well as come up on shore and onto the beaches as well. And of course, another natural hazard to be considered is your landslides. I know that you, through your codes, are trying to address a number of these issues and get this resolved, but you have had a history of some landslides in this particular area. So what we did, excuse me, let me get a drink of water, is we identified the top 8 risks that the fire department faces in terms of 3 different aspects: the frequency of the event, the severity of the event, and how that event would impact the fire department. This particular matrix shows 8 different event types that we identified that we were going to evaluate for this community risk standard of cover. And then we identified descriptors of certain types of incidents that would fall within a low risk, a moderate risk, high risk, and extreme risk. And this table represents that matrix of all those different risk levels that your community could be faced with. This particular slide is out of National Fire Protection Association 1710. It's a standard for fire service that identifies the tasks that are required. This one is built specifically for a structural fire, but it identifies the tasks that are required for the varying levels of risk. And you can see that the risk colors correlate with the previous matrix I just showed you. And what basically needs to be done as a simultaneous action on an emergency scene. So for example, in this particular situation, a moderate risk, again, a 2,500 square foot residential fire requires about 16 or 17 people, depending on whether you're going to deploy a ladder truck or not, because you have to have the ladder truck operator in addition to the rest of the crews. But you have a number of people that are required to be on hand lines, and you have OSHA regulations requiring firefighters to have 2 people on the hose line inside the structure, 2 people outside ready to conduct rescue if something were to happen. There's ventilation that needs to be had. Rescue might need to be made. There's a number of different things, ventilation, all that. So this matrix is built for all 8 risks for the community, and we identified all the tasks that are required to be able to mitigate those risks based on the fire department's response. Good. Okay, so what we identified, and this is kind of the crux of one of our recommendations, is based on those 4 different risk levels and those 8 event types, we identified the number of firefighters you have available from the Laguna Beach Fire Department to be able to mitigate those risks. And we find that in the moderate, high risk, and extreme risk, there's insufficient numbers of firefighters to meet that risk. Now, it's true that most communities can't produce enough firefighters for extreme risk. Many communities can't produce enough firefighters for high risk. More metropolitan areas can produce enough firefighters for high risk, but many communities do produce enough firefighters to be able to at least manage the moderate risk. And that's the foundation on which we're making our recommendation. Is you're just a little undersized on the number of firefighters to be able to meet that standard of within the time frame of an effective response force. And we'll go into more detail on that in a minute. How am I doing? So this map here shows the call density using a heat map of EMS responses in your community. You run about 63% of all calls, which is about 3,800 per year. 63% are EMS related. Most of these calls are in the station 1, 2, and there's some that are scattered down in the station 4 response area. We do have a hotspot up the Laguna Beach Canyon Road, Laguna Canyon Road, and that is the I forgot the name of the
ESL.
ESO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or ASL. Yeah.
Thank you. And that is that's where that hotspot is located. And then we broke it out for fire, and we have, interestingly, more diffuse heat spots going across the city for fire responses. But again, similarly, you got down in Station 1 area, downtown, and Station 2 area. So I want to talk about a couple concepts with you related to fire protection design. And there's 2 concepts. One's called distribution, one is called concentration. Distribution is what you'll see on the left-hand column is a distribution of 4 fire stations that have a 4-minute travel time. That's a national standard for getting firefighters to respond with 1 unit to an incident to start taking actions immediately. So that's a national standard. What you like to see in a good distribution is that those station locations and the personnel responding to them can get there in that 4 minutes, cover most of the city. They're not going to cover all the city, and there's at times there may be overlap depending on the community demographics. But good distribution shows that you got most of the city covered. You may have a situation where there may be misaligned distribution, which is the middle slide, where the station is located out of place, and maybe the community grew a little bit to the south and to the east here, and they haven't constructed a station or moved a station. They need to do that. And then the third one is maybe the community has grown so much in the southeast corner, they haven't built or constructed a new station yet, so there's inadequate distribution. So those are 2 concepts. It's intended to be so that the first unit can arrive within 4 minutes and start taking initial actions, which is generally an expectation of most communities. Also, I want to note that ISO, Insurance Service Offices, uses a little bit of a different standard, but the effect is the same. They use a 1.5 mile travel distance instead of a 4-minute travel time, which is about the same footprint you would see from a fire station. The second part of this is it's kind of a balancing of resources. You want the distribution and you want good distribution, but you also don't want them too far spread apart where they cannot concentrate for the bigger events. So you want to be able to concentrate your firefighters for larger events. And that's what this or this pictorial represents. In this standard, it's an 8-minute standard instead of a 4-minute standard. So you want the firefighters to be able to come together, have sufficient numbers of personnel for the particular class of risk that you're wanting to achieve and provide for in fighting fires. And this is showing that overlap of those 4 different fire stations and the numbers of personnel. So that's distribution concentration. I wanted to share that kind of primer with you before we go into the other slides, so you have a little bit better understanding. This particular map shows Laguna Beach, and it's showing a gradient of colors starting off with 1 minute and 1 to 2 minute gradients of travel times from each of the fire stations. Based on this map, you have fairly good distribution across your community with the exception of the Laguna Canyon Road area, which is probably something that's not surprising to you. But one of the things that we're not evaluating here yet is the mutual aid aspect of this. And so you do have mutual aid available from other communities that can help you here in this particular area. Plus, there isn't as much of a risk level up in that canyon with regard to building structure numbers and personnel and people that are up there with activities. So the risk is a little bit lower than if you were in the downtown area. Another this is an ISO distribution standard. It's called the 5-mile distance. And the expectation is that all of the community risk ought to be within 5 miles of all fire stations. And that's what this map represents. If a community grew or expanded its boundaries beyond the 5 miles and there were structures in that particular area, it would likely see that they'd be rated a class 10, which means that they would not have any insurance or any fire protection. So their insurance rates would go extremely high, or they may not even be able to obtain insurance. We good? Another distribution measure that ISO uses is ladder truck service. Whenever a community has 5 or more buildings, 3 or more stories in height, or 5 or more buildings that exceed 3,500 gallons per minute in required fire flow, then a ladder truck is required according to ISO. And the city of Laguna does not have a ladder truck in service and deployable. So we looked at the ladder truck companies that surround Laguna to see whether they might be able to provide benefit for the city of Laguna. The standard for that is 2.5 miles. You can see by this particular map that the maps don't even come into the city of Laguna and would not provide any protection for you. However, I did notice in your rating from ISO, they did give you a 10%, a partial credit for ladder service, presumably because you have a mutual aid agreement with these 3 entities. So I want to talk about the effective response force briefly. This particular map is showing just the Laguna Beach Fire Department resources alone. And it's colored to represent the number of stations that can arrive in a particular area. You can see between station 1 and 2, you can get maximally 4 stations to arrive to that particular part of the area. And that equates to 13 firefighters that you currently have on staff. This is all premised on the idea that everyone's in station, no one else is out on calls, and everything's fine and quiet, which is usually not the case. There's usually something going on. The station may be out of place. It may not be in this particular response zone. So just realize that this is a snapshot of time of all stations available. That's the current level of service that you have right now. So we evaluated the concentration from mutual aid resources separately. And so this big red blob is the evaluation of 13 fire stations with their 8-minute travel times coming to help Laguna and what that looks like. And you can see that the Laguna Canyon Road, you've got good coverage up there. You remember back earlier in the presentation, I was mentioning we might look at this. This is where the mutual aid can benefit the city of Laguna up in that particular area. And you do have some coverage, pretty good coverage in the Station 4 response area on the south end of Laguna, and a little bit on the northwest tip of Laguna as well. So you do have some coverage there, but by and large, the majority of your risk is not within the time standards under NFPA 1710, where you can take benefit of the mutual aid response. This map pulls them both together. It shows you, and it's showing the numbers of stations. It shows you the numbers of stations that can arrive, and I can tell you the numbers of people based on where the staffing level of each of those stations. The areas where you have 7 to 10 fire stations arriving, the dark green up at the north end is about 35 to 50 firefighters. The yellow area between station 1 and 2 is 4 stations, and you're still looking at the 13 firefighters under the current staffing model. Now, down on the Peace Arch, did I get that right? The south end, the light green. I don't think I got the name right.
It's 3 Arch Bay.
3 Arch Bay.
Tree Arch Bay. Thank you. Sorry. That particular area can get 5 stations in there. So you're looking at the ability to get more resources in there on that south part. But by and large, the majority of the city of Laguna is not getting covered with sufficient numbers of firefighters. And that's where we come down to our conclusion that there is undersizing of the effective response force, if you will, or the concentration of firefighters for your community for just a moderate risk for being able to handle a residential structure fire. And that leads us into recommendations.
I'm going to chat about recommendations for a few minutes here. And in your agenda packet, you have a full list of all of the recommendations that ESCI has made with this project. And I'm just going to highlight a few out of the 4 general categories that they fall into for us. One was emergency service deployment, personnel and staffing, community risk reduction, and then general management components. And as Richard was saying, with the undersized response force that you have, one of our key recommendations is that you look to increase staffing in your fire department. And over the next 1 to 2 years, look to see if you can bring staffing up to 15 personnel per shift. And within 5 years, bring staffing up to 17 personnel per shift, which would provide you the adequate effective response force for the majority of your community. One of the things that the city has historically done is every patient that needed paramedic level care on the way to the ambulance, both paramedics off the fire engine would jump in the ambulance and go off, and that would leave 1 person on your fire engine to go get them. If you're able to increase staffing, particularly station 1 and station 2, we would recommend that for the majority of patients, unless they're in critical need of 2 paramedics, that they would just be escorted by 1 paramedic and your ambulance crew. That would leave 3 personnel on the engine. It would not have to go to the hospital because now you control the ambulances in the city. They can bring your firefighter back. That engine could stay in service in their area to serve the community on another call. We also think that there's an opportunity, and Richard talked about ladder service, with the geography in the city, the setbacks for some of the homes, the elevation changes. We know that a ladder truck, big ladder truck, can't get to most of the city, probably over 50% of the city. But they do make an apparatus, an engine, similar to what you have with a ladder mounted on top, typically 50 to 65-foot extension ladder that can provide some elevation capabilities to access second stories, far setbacks. Your firefighters can potentially effect rescues, and it also provides an elevated fire stream to help fight some fires in those difficult areas. So we would encourage the department to look at that when it's time to purchase an next fire engine, if that might be an apparatus that would provide benefit to the city. You currently have a part-time nurse educator, and we think that that position should move to a full-time position. Your nurse educator was brought on before you had an ambulance program. You know, have 2 ambulances, additional EMTs, 20 actually EMTs. There's a lot more oversight from a clinical perspective. Your ambulance coordinator is doing a great job administratively, but having that professional EMS knowledge, providing training, looking at certifications, looking at exposure to things like bloodborne pathogens and tracking those patients and those employees, we think that is easily a full-time position that you could look at. I know the chief has already been working on transitioning your administrative captain in the fire department to overseeing more of the training and safety programs. We think that's a better match of duties and critical functions. We would encourage you to consider at some point a full-time public educator that can help expand the education programs in the community relative to the risks that you face. One of the things that we saw was difficulty with the fire department getting timely IT assistance. And not that staff isn't doing a great job, but the fire department has a tremendous amount of technology in their stations and on their fire engines. And they need support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if those systems go down. And they could use help in that regard. And then we think that you could consider doing full sponsorships for some of your firefighters to paramedic school. You currently hire firefighter paramedics. You also hire firefighters, and there's some work with the city to provide some offset if they choose to go to paramedic school. But it's an expensive endeavor, and we think a full sponsorship, city sending their good qualified firefighters that have interest and the skills to become paramedics. I'll be honest with you, the marketplace for firefighter medics right now is demanding. Everybody's pursuing the same great people. And if you can grow your own from inside, and your ambulance operators potentially hired as firefighters, and at some point you send them then to paramedic school, you help grow within the community your own workforce, and that could be beneficial. In the community risk reduction area, obviously there's every community I think has a need to work hard and improve their public education programs. Again, the risk that the city faces here in Laguna Beach is well known, and continuous efforts to improve education, not only of our residents, but of our visitors and our hospitality industry employees on the risks that we face in the community and how to help mitigate those. You do have a well-running, hardworking fuels management program relative to the wildland areas and where they abut the city. We think that there's potential to expand those. We have a lot of interior canyons, private and public drainages, and we think a partnership in the community and some work could expand some of those clearance projects, as well as probably having somebody outside look at how well that fuel modification program and clearance program is actually working relative to the current risk that you face. And then we think you could formally adopt the red flag parking program that you had piloted at one point that restricted parking on certain streets on red flag hazard days. We think that that program should be formally adopted and potentially expanded to other areas based on access needs during those emergency situations. And then there's some general management recommendations that we have, including developing a facility improvement and replacement plan for your facilities. We know that there's efforts underway to replace Station 4. Station 1, 2, and 3 obviously have some upgrades that are needed, not only to the facilities, but from a seismic perspective as well, and whether they can be upgraded or need to be replaced. I know the city went through a significant seismic study of all the city buildings recently as well. So that all kind of ties together. We've talked about the standards of cover. We think that is something that you should adopt, and also develop a 10-year capital replacement plan for your apparatus and equipment. And then one of the challenges that your firefighters face is adequate training. They don't have really good areas to practice and improve their manipulative fire ground skills. They have a little bit of space and some props up in the canyon. And right now, if you want to do a live burn or some really good above ground training, your firefighters have to leave the city, which means it takes probably no more than one fire engine out of the city, either to Newport Beach or up to OCFA, which means they're no longer available to be in the community during those hours. So in the future, looking at ways to improve facilities to provide some of those key skills for your firefighters. And then along the way, a strategic plan, which is a 3 to 5 year, very specific goal, objective, task-oriented roadmap to get you to the future is something we would suggest as well. Those are kind of the highlights of the recommendations. And again, in your agenda packet, you have a full set of recommendations that ESCI provided to the city. Again, thank you. I think we're ready for questions. Turn it back to the mayor. And again, hats off to your staff for their hard work along the way with us.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Richard or Patrick from the council
Very
or
quickly.
staff?
First, thank you for this. It's long overdue in many ways, not just for your guys' work, but for the city as a whole, because I think really until Bob and Sue worked on the 2019 wildfire mitigation plan, this city, which has such a significant wildfire risk, was not doing nearly enough. So I appreciate Bob and Sue for your leadership. What's the difference between, so you mentioned there's a self-accrediting agency for the standards of cover, and then there's also the ISO. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, those are different agencies. So, yeah, let me explain that. So the ISO is Insurance Service Office, and they come out and evaluate the city's risk with respect to fire protection alone. So
Okay.
that's a totally separate thing. Then there's the Commission for Fire Accreditation International, which is a separate organization, and it dictates the requirements by which a fire department can be accredited as an agency. Many of the public safety, finance, law enforcement, other types of services that communities provide, they're accredited through a particular accredited agency. And that's what that is.
So it sounds like we really need to be striving towards both of the metrics of those two
Yeah,
separate.
so doing the
entities.
CRA and getting the strategic plan done, it puts you on a really good path
For
to
both.
taking the next step, which is that accreditation process.
And then hopefully going, because I think we're level 3 ISO right now. So getting hopefully to level 2 and eventually to level 1.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then just as a kind of a question, I'm just gonna make this a comment for the city manager and the fire chief. If we get an update on the efforts, and this could be through email, or maybe on a future agenda item on the currently being implemented items related to streamlining the CDP requirements for fuel modification, then also an update on the 2019 wildfire mitigation report. I know a lot of those recommendations are implemented, but it'd be, at some point, I'd like to see kind of what more there is to do. You know, obviously we know Laguna Canyon Road is part of that. And then the questions I have about under needs further evaluation on page 3, we don't, so I think the fact that we had 63% of the calls are EMS related. So my question would be, why not include, why not prioritize, consider full sponsorships of paramedic training programs among existing firefighters? And then the second one, which I think maybe might be even lower hanging fruit, is consider transitioning the part-time nurse educator to a full-time position, because it makes a lot of sense that we wouldn't want just to be overseeing our ambulance program with just the coordinator, but having that quality improvement. That seems to me intuitively to be a good idea. I would leave it to the experts. So I guess maybe that's just a comment. And then I'm supportive of the recommendation to add 3 positions. I think ultimately we need to really strive to go beyond that, but at least it's a study session though.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So, okay.
ahead.
But isn't the public at the end of a study session?
Well, I was going to try to interleave the public in so they could give their comments before we made our final ones, but it's fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my bad.
No, that's good.
Anyway, that's what I have.
Thanks, Alex. Who's next? Anybody? Bob? No?
Yeah, I'll go. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward. I think these are discussions we need to have every every year on public safety, both for fire and police and where we are, because it's our number one job. So thank you for bringing it forward. What I have a question about is, let's assume we embrace all of this and we look at the cost benefit analysis of this and say, well, what does it do for us? And it's really hard to pin down.
Mhm.
You know, it's just like, okay, it just improves public safety by this much. And what does that mean? But it costs us this much. We don't really have in a position to know that. So I'm asking, one of the really most important things that we face and critical is people losing insurance. I think, people in the room here may have lost insurance because of the high severity fire zones that we're in. If we adopt all of these recommendations, does it have any impact on insurance at all? I mean, I don't know if we can answer that question or not.
I don't think I feel qualified to answer that question.
Yeah, I would agree. Not sure. I think certainly improving your ISO rating, which is what insurance industry does utilize, has the potential to be beneficial. But I think I certainly can't say what the insurance industry is going to do next. Something obviously has to happen because it's not working for homeowners in California and other states now, as you see across the country. So hard to say. ISO improvement certainly is helpful. What everything the insurance company is going to do is hard to say, but I think the more prevention things we can do in the city, the better position we are
Sure.
for those arguments and those conversations, the
That's
better.
hardening the sites, for example.
Exactly.
Our fuel modification
Fuel
plans,
mods,
which have
exactly.
gone, pretty well. We have a lot more to do, but so far they've been pretty damn successful, I think, and well done by staff.
I agree.
But the ISO portion, if you could elaborate on that, how do you achieve these ISO standards that you talk about in here, which to me are little difficult to understand? And what level, when you achieve that certification, then what does it mean to the insurance companies? They go, oh, but we'll lower everybody's insurance by 20%, 10%.
Yeah,
what are they-
there is a scale. They're not a very open organization to share information. Let me just say that. And so knowing exactly how they calculate things is a little bit of a voodoo magic. But it's certainly, you do see a decreasing cost in insurance as you go from a 10 down to the 1. And as I understand it, it's a little bit exponential. So the closer you're down to a 2 to a 1, it's a very minor change, but it's a bit of a change versus a difference between going from a 9 to an 8. It's a lot bigger change.
Gotcha.
So I really can't answer your question directly, other than when we did start the project, I did speak with someone who is well knowledgeable about ISO, and they felt very comfortable based on the information I shared with them that if the city was interested in having someone come in and look at that particular subject, the fire department could probably get to it in a class 2 pretty easily.
But you
from
mentioned
a
that
3.
You mentioned earlier that certification is really difficult and there's very few cities that are certified. Is that-
And that's the accreditation. That's
That's
different than the
okay.
ISO.
That's
so,
certification and
yeah.
accreditation.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank
The
you.
the accreditation's very
Thank
few
you.
and far between. Yep.
Yeah, thank you for your patience with these questions. I have another question about the actual number of, let's say, moderate risk calls that are actually took place over the last 10 years. I mean, what are we looking at in terms of a trend line for Laguna Beach? Because I don't know the number. Maybe I was given it earlier. I apologize if I don't. I'm a little ignorant on that.
Yeah, some of those more detailed specifics were not in the report, but looking over the last 3 years, as far as structure fires, it's, as you can see, it's recognized as 2%, which is about 30 structure fires that the department's dispatched to in the community a year.
Moderate or low? Or
Those are
both?
the
Or
moderate,
combination? Okay, these are 30 over the last 3 years that are moderate?
30 a year. And
30 a year. Okay.
yeah,
Is that high or what does it mean? What does that mean? Anything or it's just, I mean,
it would be hard. I mean,
okay.
based on the stations, the population, excuse me, the population, it's enough to, we have the resources, but we could do better.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more question, and I'll let my colleagues talk about more. So I watch a lot of fire truck shows because my 2.5-year-old seems to be addicted to fire trucks. And so when I see these fire movies and I'm going, wow, this is cool. And fire truck shows up on the site, maybe it's within 4 minutes, but it takes quite a long time to enable the actual start of a fire. The water get on, the crews come out. Do you have any stats on that at all? How quickly from the point, let's say we adopt this and we get a 4-minute response time, what's the average time it takes to get the water to the fire? Any idea?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, a big part of that is how many people are on the fire engine, right? That dictates
Yeah.
the work tasks that need to be done. And we worked with staff in this process to look at all of the critical tasks that need to take place for each of those different risks and how many people that would be total. So number of people affects that, but the standard for the 4-minute response is also for the rest of the effective response force to be there within 8 minutes and to put those 16 personnel on scene to effectively begin to manage all of those tasks, which includes on a fire, cutting open the roof, connecting to the fire hydrant, putting water into the hose lines, as well as a team that now is required to be solely dedicated to rescuing your firefighters if something goes wrong. And that's all part of that collection of personnel.
I think also George was maybe leaning into, once you arrive, how long does it take to actually get the things done? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, when do you get the
Yeah, the water on the fire.
Water to get on the
So
fire.
there's some variables there, but generally 1 to 2 minutes. It takes a while. You gotta get the water supply established. You gotta get the pump running. You gotta get the hose lines extended. You got to get the firefighters in place. They have to get their masks. But there's 100 little things that all have to happen simultaneously. And then there's also ventilation's required. Then they've got to ventilate the space before they can make entry. So 1 to 2 minutes in general.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thank you for the report.
Sure.
This is really for the chief. I'd like to know, so there's obviously, a couple detailed questions that we have here, some of which we've covered, but we do have a tight time constraint today. And can you explain how you see the strategic planning process addressing the remaining SOC recommendations? If through that process, if you see an opportunity for further what answers to some of the questions that might come up?
Yeah, I would like to see us move forward on the strategic planning, maybe a 3-year strategic plan. And we would go through all of the recommendations and recognize the resources. And through your leadership, through the involvement with the community, we'd prioritize those and then come up obviously with the objectives and goals. A big challenge is going to be to identify funding for implementation, because there's some big items in there, like replacement of the other fire stations, some of the replacement cycles for the apparatus, identifying funding if we're going to move forward on increasing the staffing levels. But those are the things that need to be discussed.
But it would be more likely organized in such a way to where we can kind of take it one step at a time. And
Absolutely.
okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Bob, do you have something?
I really want to hear from the public, but just one quick question on the strategic planning, and just my experience, having been up here for a while, they take way too long. So is there a way to phase, to go through this in maybe a phased way that we're getting feedback on some of the things that can be looked at first, rather than waiting for a fully baked strategic plan?
Exactly.
We're fortunate enough to have some of the funds left over with our contract with ESCI, and because they're familiar with now our community and the recommendations that they provided, they also provide the services to create a strategic plan. With discussions with them, we believe that we can get a strategic plan from start to finish in about 3 months.
That'd be record time.
It
Yeah,
would be.
Yeah. Really? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. How many people want to speak on this item? Okay, we're right up against, can one of you speak for everybody? Is that possible? Okay, I'll tell you what, everyone can have 1 minute and we have to get back to the. Okay, good. Okay, Matt, 1 minute, Matt.
I will. Matt Lawson, EDPC. Look, this is pretty simple. At the end of the day, our fire department spent a year working with the best consultants in the country for this. They produced the gold standard report, Community Risk Assessment Standards of Cover Study. The bottom line is it's not about the odds, it's about the stakes. This is what we need to do. There's no question about that, to mitigate the enormous and existential risk of wildfire that we face in this community. We all understand that. And the bottom line is, if we augment these resources and augment these capabilities, we're going to have, it's a very prudent investment to protect the 23,000 of us who live here, to safeguard our homes, preserve our ability to obtain fire insurance and mortgages, to secure the city's tax base, to look after the air, land, and water that were kind of in our care, and to do all that we can to ensure that this unique community avoids the tragic fate of communities like Paradise and Lahaina. So what we need really is an implementation plan, and if we can get it done, we've got the people in place to do it. Our fire command staff is excellent. We've got the best city manager, thanks to your fine efforts, arguably the best city manager in the recent history of Orange County. He did it in Newport. Their public safety agencies are second to none. Let's do the same thing here. We spend what they spend per capita. Let's do it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Matt.
Be very brief. Council, Mayor. 88% of the city is in a very high fire hazard severity zone. The fire hazard facing our community is not going down, it's going up with climate change and continued growth. The city, however, has not funded fire safety adequately over the years. Fire department's understaffed, the infrastructure is inadequate, and the defensible space is deficient throughout the town. We have a long way to go. I think this community risk assessment standards of coverage is excellent, and it should be taken very seriously. The fact that we haven't had a 1993 fire doesn't mean one won't start this fire season. We are way behind, and the recommendations in this report are really important. I think they come from a highly competent group who knows what they're talking about. We should accept it as such. Therefore, I strongly urge the City Council to adopt these recommendations and most immediately to authorize the hiring of additional fire department personnel, and also authorize the training of paramedics, and hopefully at some point have our ambulances staffed with paramedics. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Good afternoon, Mayor Kemp, council members, and thank you for that excellent report. And my colleagues on the EDPC, they're here this afternoon. Sonny Myers, longtime resident. I'm also on the EDPC and the director of our CERT program. I'm here today to urge you to, for your approval for the funding of the critical risk assessment and the standards of cover for our fire department. Having adequate personnel available at all times to protect our citizens, homes, and property in Laguna Beach is and should be a top priority. The positions should be approved without delay. Adding 3 firefighters to our fire department will bring our fire department up to the minimum nationally recommended levels of staffing as recommended in the critical risk assessment standards of cover report before you for consideration today. Laguna Beach continues to grow and our visitor population increases every year. It is critical that our emergency services continue to keep pace with that growth. Having the proper number of personnel and equipment and making sure our facility infrastructure is up to date, along with reviewing that the funds needed to keep Laguna Beach protected, should be a top priority. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sonny.
Be quick. I want to cut this down as much as I can. My name is Rex Theobald. I'm in CERT and I live up in Arch Beach Heights. My fire insurance was recently canceled I got the
Could you
notice.
speak closer to the microphone?
Okay,
You're
sorry.
kind of tall.
Yeah, I got the notice last week or last month about my fire insurance being canceled. And I have, a couple months to get new insurance lined up. I need to do it quickly. So I think about our fire department as being a sort of fire insurance. It's already understaffed. They don't have the resources that they need to come up to the standard. So we need to work really fast to get this done. I see it as something that needs to be done as the weather changes rather than over the course of several years. So I'm encouraging you guys to take this seriously and to take it urgently and work quickly on it. Get it done. I appreciate you having this meeting. It shows that you're interested. I know that the whole council has a big commitment to public safety, and I appreciate that. So please give this the priority that it needs.
Thanks, Rex. Anybody else?
You are tall. My name's Jen Sorensen. You might recognize my name. I am applying for the EDPC at the next hour. And I'd like to just speak to the human toll of these fires. I've been in emergency medicine my entire life in Glendale, California. And most of everybody in the room who knows me, I've told them I was evacuated during the 2009 station fire. Fires are the only thing I know, inanimate object, that is alive. We give them names. In 2009, I was evacuated, and I hope I can get through this without crying. I lost a friend. His name was Arnie Quinones. He was a firefighter at Station 82 in La Cañada for 2 years. And if you knew him one day, you knew him for life. And as I was worried about my house and my evacuation, Arnie lost his life. His daughter will turn 15 in September. I lost 2 friends in the Woolsey fire. They were trying to leave their home in Malibu, and they were overcome with fire because they got lost. And my brother lost his house in '93. So fires are an extreme importance to me. So yeah, the cost benefit, I get it. And I understand if we hire more firefighters, they're going to eat today and they're going to eat in the future. But we can't let this go. An overtaxed, tired firefighter in an outdated building, that's not what we need. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is David Horn. I'm a member of the EDPC and the chair of the Greater Laguna Coast Fire Safe Council and the semi-resident expert on insurance. I urge you to adopt all these things. You don't need to hear that again, but I will give you a quick summary of what's going on in the insurance business. The Rs that are the insurance companies have underestimated the cost of all these catastrophes for the last 10 or 15 years. Their models were built on hurricanes and floods. They didn't take fires into account. So the result of that is they underpriced their policies to the insurance company for the last 15, 20 years. So guess what? When it hits, they're making it up. That is why we can't get insurance. It has nothing to do with these other stuff. It has to do with the Rs didn't make money. They're going to make it back up, and they're going to do it as quickly as they can. They are adjusting their models to take into account wildfires and other catastrophes, but it was mostly all based on hurricanes and the big numbers that come from floods. So that's why there's not a direct link between what we do and any community does and their insurance rates changing immediately. It's going to be a long-term process until the Rs get their money back. Then they'll moderate their increases, and then people will get insurance again because the insurance companies can get insurance. So that is what the reality of and that's a global situation. The Rs are based in Munich, Luxembourg, Zurich, places like that. They really don't care about what goes on anywhere else. They just want their money that they've been undercharging, and they're going to get it back soon.
That's good, David. Thank you. It's helpful.
Hi, I'm Tim Templeton, top of the world resident. My neighborhood is very close to some vulnerable areas. We've had a few close calls, so this is a subject that's very near and dear to me. I don't think we're going to be able to affect insurance in town, so the best thing to do is not have to need it. And that's having good coverage, good response to fires, defensible space, doing all the things that we recommended today. So I'm here to just continue to push for better coverage and better public safety so that we really don't have to worry about insurance. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Anybody else? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Okay, council?
I think there's a strong consensus up here, obviously, that this is the most important topic we deal with in the city. I think that the recommendations here are good and should be adopted by us, so I would be supporting all of them, and was encouraged to hear that it might be a 3-month turnaround on a strategic plan, because there's a lot more to be implemented. What we're adopting today is really just an initial baby step, and the strategic plan will give us the roadmap to what else we have to do, and funding demands for it. So I'd support all 4 of these.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
I agree with Bob.
Let me ask a question here, because it's not identified. What we're voting on is these 4 items here. So there's receive the presentation, which we've done. Discuss and consider adding 3 full-time firefighters. We didn't discuss that, but necessarily. Support a strategic plan to continue evaluation, and then reappropriate 25,000 for that plan. I'm fully supportive of a lot of these. I just don't know the full-time fire positions. There isn't space for those people in the fire stations.
The 3 firefighters would be placed right here at Fire Station 1. And like part of the discussion, they're truly for allowing Engine 1 to stay in service more often. On average, they're running 68% of the department's calls. They're the busiest station. The ambulance is now transporting about 4 times a day. On average, 2 of those transports are ALS, which means the firefighter steps over to the ambulance, and therefore they're out of service a couple hours a day just because of the ambulance and the firefighter paramedic being out of town. So that is the fastest and probably most effective way of increasing our services in the busiest fire station.
I'm all for improving public safety on this. The cost of the full-time firefighter positions has not been identified.
I think it is.
In the staff report.
It's in the staff
It isn't
report.
in the staff report.
I think
It wasn't highlighted in any of these documents yet. It's in the staff report. Is it $100,000 per firefighter? $200,000? I mean, we're raising our budget. I'm reluctant to add staff because I'm cheap, on behalf of the city residents, because we have 336 employees already. And we've hired a lot of employees, even though our population has gone down. So I want to be prudent about this too. That's why I'm asking these questions. How much money is it going to cost? Because Chief, I'm not trying to be antagonistic here, and I'm all for public safety, but last year we provided you with a secretary and a strategic analyst and an assistant fire chief. We've got no report back about what the improvement of the operations are relative to those hires, and that was a lot of money we put in, and I haven't gotten a note back about what that, how that's improved public safety and how it's improved the efficiency of your department as well. So that's where I'd like to see us do that every year, have a forum where we bring in the fire department and police department to concentrate on public safety. That's not to say I'm not going to vote for this, but I'm just asking these questions.
The financial analysis, George, is on page 3 of the staff report, or
Okay.
page 5 of 5.
Where's that?
Page 5 of 5, financial analysis.
Okay.
Well, and I think when we voted on the proposed budget, and I'll just ask Gavin to confirm, we directed staff to include $500,000. So is that in the budget that you've now worked on to present next meeting?
So Councilman Whalen, yes, we, and Councilman Weiss, we did include $500,000 in the Measure LL in the proposed budget we presented back at the workshop. So it's, that flat amount is in the budget already.
All right, thank you. Then I'm fully supportive of all 4 of these items at this point. I'm satisfied that this is the right thing to do. I do want to, consider that we're going to take steps afterward when you want an IT person, nurse, other things that we're constantly adding staff and we have to be careful about our spending. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with George. We have to be careful about our spending. I think there's a lot of, we should look for opportunities to save money, but I mean, to me, I think this report does a really good job of laying out why we need, how adding these 3 positions will really improve our response times and make it so that we don't have firefighters, we don't have an effective operation that's outside of our city in Mission Viejo at Big Mission, and you know, potentially on a summer day cut off from our town. That's just not something that we want. So I think in these circumstances, I'm supportive of the recommended actions.
Mark?
I'm
Yeah,
supportive of the recommended actions. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Mark. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's it. I'm supportive of the
okay.
recommended actions.
Yeah, you know, I think George raises a valid point, and like all of these positions that we add, we do have to get feedback as to the effectiveness of them, not just in the fire department, community development, all of it, right? I mean, that's a fair point. But I think you know, just the point that Chief just made, you know, that you've got an engine out of service, maybe 4 to 5 hours a day, depending on the number of calls. This is going to be an immediate benefit and one that's in the budget. So I will move the 4 recommended actions.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay, thanks for the great report, you guys. Thanks for everybody coming today, speaking. We're going to take a few seconds to get to our next item while everybody kind of clears out of here.
What's that? What's that?
I think when we do a 5-year
I
agree with you.
Well, the problem is this is a pig in a poke. So you have no idea, well, the 30 structural fires we've had over the last 3 years, or each year, like 90 structural fires, moderate risk. So none of those have posed a greater risk in the community that I can understand. It doesn't take 1 or 2 minutes to put a fire hose into a hose and get it. It takes like 10. No, I know it doesn't. I'll have to talk to you about it.